Right, welcome to 1FG Archives here on YouTube. This is Just Chatting Volume 5. We're going to be continuing on my top 25 games of all time, my personal top 25, and we're going to be doing games 11 through 15. So let's get started. Right, and again, this is just a reminder that this is just my personal top 25 games of all time, so everybody has their favorites. And, but yeah, so we're going to be continuing on with number 15, and that is Mega Man 2. This is absolutely the best Mega Man game I have ever played, and hands down, everything was done right for this game. The platforming, the having the extra weapons, and yeah, the metal blades made the game a little bit easy to get through and all that, but overall, the music is just awesome in the game. The sound effects were right on because it's like right after they did Mega Man, when they put out Mega Man 3, they changed the sound effects of it, and I really, really liked the sound effects in Mega Man 2 compared to the third one, and then they added the slide effect to it. It just they started adding too much to it. And I understand, games develop over time. You got to add uh, more content in order to make games interesting and all that stuff. But overall, this game was just a lot of fun. It's so much fun, in fact, that it hands down even all the Mega Man X series, the Battle Network, all those other Mega Man games that I've played before. This one just absolutely just blows me away. Every time I enjoy it. I always play it on the difficult setting because I like to challenge myself every time I play it. And now it just becomes second nature to me. If I play it on normal setting, it just it's just too easy. But that was only in the American version. The American version had normal and difficult settings. In the Japanese version, it was just straight up. I think it was only on difficult settings. So it definitely had its challenge to it. So but but yeah. So I just love Mega Man. I mean, anybody who's played retro games, if you don't like a Mega Man game, you know you got to play this one. I would say first over all of the Mega Man games because of what it offered for the series. It definitely was in terms of the difficulty, it definitely was a step down from the original Mega Man. But it still had its moments especially the surprise moment when the dragon came up at the in the first Wily's castle boss, everything that I know I jumped when I first saw that thing come up out of the ground, from nowhere. Okay, but that's enough for Mega Man 2, so let's move on to number 14. Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest. Absolutely my second favorite Castlevania game of all time. It was first real open world, type of game for Castlevania, and it just did everything right. It just, you go into shops, you can get money, you get experience, and all that stuff. It was an RPG action adventure. It just platforming. It just did everything really, really well. And I play it I pick it up every now and then just to keep my knowledge of the game fresh. And most of the time, I don't ever try to do hundos. I just blitz through it. But for the most part, but graphically, it looked amazing. The soundtrack was amazing, especially because Bloody Tears is my absolute favorite Castlevania tune of all time and originated right here. Actually, it was actually Haunted Castle, I think, that had Bloody Tears originally, but they did it. They put it in this game, and it just made the overworld, that much more, as you're progressing through, and it just made things just so much easier to be able to get through the game. And then also the mansions, all the stuff that you had to go and search for in order to get upgrades and everything. You got a shield with the rib, just little thing that just trying to find where the crystals are, the different towns, having to cross over the swamps. I mean, it just had everything right, and the sound effects were great too. Um, Being able to like instantly die if you fall into water, taking too much damage, hitting spikes, all that kind of stuff. Anything with a typical, Castlevania game. This thing, you just your whip upgrades, and then you get the flame whip at the end. to get your final whip upgrade, which was free. It just made things that much more enjoyable. It just all powerful with that flame whip, and that flame whip had a really good sound effect to it too. But my only problem with this game was that the final boss was way too easy. But it took too long. But the great thing about it was there were three different of endings that you can find in this game. One where both of you survive. You basically trying to kind of like the typical, you live, beat Dracula, and then the last one, which is basically because if you take too long, Simon ends up dying after burying, Dracula and stuff. Not to spoil anything, but it just that's what the variety of this game had. It just had everything and just did it absolutely perfectly. That said, there was only one other Castlevania game that was better, but in my for my personal, top 25. But we'll get to that shortly. All right, so moving on to number 13, Metroid 2 Return of Samus. Now I know I've talked about this game already in the earlier volume of episodes of Just Chatting. What else can I say about this? Is not my absolute favorite Metroid game, but it is my second one because of just everything that it did. It was exactly what Samus was brought to do. She was a bounty hunter doing her job. She went to SR388 to eradicate the Metroids and everything, and then she had that little one just right at the end, which set the whole tone for like the little surprise ending where she befriends um that little baby Metroid, which I have a bunch of these little buggers right here. They're so cute. Anyway, I love my little baby Metroids. I have five of these things, by the way. They have Little Shop of Horrors, Squishy, Squiggly, uh, Talon, and Dawn. So those are I have five of these little buggers. Um, they're so cute. Anyway, and so is that baby Metroid that hatches at the end of the game. It just set the whole thing. It's like, wait a minute, she's supposed to eradicate it, and then she doesn't. She takes it back with her for the scientists to study. Just like a continuation with Metroid 3. It just and just going through the whole game with the jump scares potentially and stuff like that, where if you randomly run into a Metroid and the music like plays and all that, finding all the missile tanks, it did like a little mini scavenger hunt. There wasn't really much backtracking in the game, which was very typical of the Metroid series, but in this one it was progression more or less. There was a couple little points that you had to backtrack, but overall there just wasn't that much in terms of it because you just kept going on. You waited for that lava to go down so that you could progress to the next area, and I think that's how they did it right with this game too. It's just if you were lost, you would eventually find your way because just like any other game, because um, it was clearly an easier path to go through and find. But what else can I say about the game? Just the overall progression of it was very simple to follow. At least it was for me. I know it's not for everybody, but in terms of the overall, just finding your items, finding the different, yeah, there was a few little spots in the game where you had to bust through walls, but that's typical with any Metroid games. Those of us who are familiar with the series know that you're always going to be finding those kind of things. So, but overall, it was that ending that really kind of just put the whole thing, into perspective and saying that, you know, hey, she befriended the thing that she was sworn out to destroy, type of thing, and it only just got worse from there. So, as we know, as we continue through the Metroid series, but anyway, so number 13 is Metroid 2: Return of Samus. So moving on to number 12, Life Force. This is also known as Salamander, in Japanese and other console and other like renditions of the game. This one on the NES was an absolute masterpiece. This is my favorite shoot 'em up of all time. It was perfectly balanced in terms of difficulty and just the weapon upgrades, just like the typical Gradius. You get the little pods that'll let you progress through the bottom line and everything, just to be able to basically just get your upgrades and everything. And two player on this game made it that much more fun. It had the Konami code. which if in the beginning until you got used to the game, so you could play it on 3 lives, that was a huge plus for this game too. Um, I have played this thing on the arcade version for like many different console, or the arcade version, Turbo Graphics version. I've played so many versions of this game, but for the NES version is my absolute favorite one because of just what they're able to accomplish. Of course, there's always going to be the traditional NES slowdown, but the music in the game, the graphics, the sound effects, everything was just really well done, and it just adds to the overall experience of the game, where you're just going to progress through and get through everything. It's not going to be you're not going to find, and then it just loops. Once you finish the game, it just starts all over again and just gets more and more challenging each time. Until eventually you're just going to run out of continues or lives or whatever it may be. But I love shoot 'em ups very much, but nothing can compare to what this game brought to the table. I've known ever since I had played this game back in the early late 80s, I think it was. We were over visiting my our next door neighbor who had an NES too, and he had, of course, we would always play games and stuff like that. We'd always come over, play certain games that they had, or certain games that we had. They would come over to our place. We'd go. It was just a constant back and forth and stuff. So it just, but this was one of the games where they had the game, they had this game, and we just fell in love with it right away. I mean, I was laughing more or less when I watching my brothers play this two-player mode and just watching them blow up like every few seconds. I mean, I was I was in tears by hearing that explosion sound so often because it was just so funny just hearing that. But I mean, if you go back and you watch some of my earlier content on the page, you'll see that I did a two-player mode with my buddy Kyle when he was out here visiting, and we played Life Force, and it was just so much fun. So number 12 is Life Force, and finally for this for 11 through 15, at number 11 is Kid Chameleon. This game blew me away. I didn't know what to expect when I first saw it on the Genesis, and as soon as I heard the opening music and everything, it just drew me in. The fact that this little kid can get put helmets on and change his form, and it have all kinds of different weapons and attacks and all that goodness, it just I wanted to play this game so bad. And when my brother, who had he was the one that had the Genesis, as I got a little bit older and a little bit more responsible, he finally allowed me to play, on his Sega Genesis. Now, this wasn't the first game I played on the Sega Genesis, but it was one of the first games I played because I was so interested and intrigued. But man, the difficulty of this game is just so hard. There are so many levels where you have to keep your mask, the current mask or whatever it is that they give you at the start of the level, that you have to progress through the entire thing just to get through. And man, it is just crazy. I mean, I'm actually on speedrun.com for this game. I think I'm in 29th place for the four bosses run. And I think it was like 54 minutes, a little over 54 minutes. Anybody who can beat this game, it knows that this is not an easy game to play. Um, the controls take a little bit of getting used to for sure, and I think that's probably the only downfall I have about this game is the controls. They're very slippery, I guess, so to speak. Especially when you use like the red stealth, the samurai. It just you're gonna jump over things and you're gonna slip off. It's kind of a little bit hard to control at times, depending upon what the character or the mask that you currently have on. Um, and then the bosses themselves, there's four of them. There's no special like final boss, whatever. There's just four bosses. Once you reach the final one, which is Plethora, that's it. The game's over. And yeah, the ending was kind of cheesy. Nothing too out of the ordinary. It is what you expected. Hey, you saved all the kids, and everything, and that's pretty much it. There wasn't. It did spark two fan made games though. There were two fan made games that were released after this, Kid Chameleon 2 and Kid Chameleon 3. You can see them online if you look on YouTube. I have streamed the second one a few times, a couple times rather. And the third one I've played manually, but I think the ROM that I have is messed up because it keeps freezing on me. But that's okay, that's fine. That's what happens in fan-made games. Those kind of things happen. But they're just as hard as the original one here. I mean, the sound effects, everything, the music is what I was saying earlier. The music in me is what really drew me into this game a lot. It just feels like you're whatever area that you're in the game. That's the kind of feeling that you get when you're playing through those levels. It like the through the ice level, which is actually the same as the title screen sequence. The forest area, the caves, all those tunes that they specifically made for those levels fits right into it. Especially and then you get the items. You got the diamonds, the free lives, the quarters, for extra lives and continues. A lot of things that what people don't understand about this thing is the diamond powers. Every character has two. They have one at 20 diamonds and they have one at 50. So it's, you have to just kind of experiment. Like when I get towards the end of the game, I have the tendency to use my diamonds, just like that because you need them for that reason. You need them to be able to attack enemies, especially when you get to the game. If you Those who all know the game Alien Isle, you definitely get that the little Micromax, which is the little fly character. You need that little snake that goes around and goes after the enemies because otherwise that level's going to take forever and it makes it really really difficult. Especially if you go through the with the Splatterhouse mask. I forget what these called, but with the axes that he throws. It's really is a lot to take in for that game. And there's just some levels that are just they really extremely challenge you a lot, and there's nothing really that you can do about it. You just have to pull through it. And that's the overall reason why I loved this game so much is because it just absolutely was a challenge to get through it. And and again, the music, the sound effects, even the voices. I mean, we all know how the Genesis has like the gargle, little bit of gargliness to the sound effects and stuff like that, especially the voices, and things like that. But that didn't bother me one bit in this game. It sounded perfect. The way it should on a Genesis is probably one of the most classic games. And if you have never played it, definitely and you're up for a challenge, definitely try it out. Just like any of the games here that I've mentioned, just they all have their own challenges, type of thing. From Metroid 2, just when trying to defeat the Metroids as you find them. Life Force, a lot of times is just getting through the levels because the bosses themselves most of the time aren't that difficult. Mega Man 2, finding the correct order to go in. Simon's Quest, just finding out where to go next. All these games have their own difficulty and challenges. But anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. I hope you have enjoyed these 5 games of my next top 25. I said so. What I'm going to be doing for my top 10 is I'm going to be doing two games at a time. I actually wrote reviews for these for my top 10 all the way down to number 2. I'm still in the process of writing my number 1 game of all time, but I'm going to be doing 2 at a time. I actually somehow I lost accidentally deleted my number 10 thing, so I'm going to kind of ad lib that one a little bit. But when I get to number 9, I'm going to be reading it off from my notepad on my phone because that's what I wrote it as. So it's going to be a little bit shorter video, but nonetheless, we're going to be continuing on as we move into my top 10. But that's going to be the next episode. So please do check me out at facebook.com/OneForsakenGaming, Instagram at OneForsakenGaming, twitch.tv/OneForsakenGaming, and of course right here on YouTube at OneFG Archives. That wraps up for this episode, and we will see you next time.